Chapter 12, African Civilizations. In this chapter, we're going to learn about Africa, the geography of Africa, a group called the Bantu-speaking people and how they migrated all over Africa. We'll talk about the gold for salt trade that developed in Western Africa, and we'll talk about the trading kingdoms in the East. Let's get started. We're going to begin with Africa's diverse geography. Diverse means different. So the entire continent of Africa is a lot different. So if you start in the north here, North Africa, this consists of mainly desert. And it's the largest desert in the world, the Sahara Desert. In the west, right here in the brown, you have three different vegetation zones. A desert, that's kind of carryover from the Sahara, grasslands, mainly over here, and savannas. Savannas and grasslands are kind of the same thing, but there's also forests in this area as well. In East Africa, you have the longest river in the world, which starts down here in the mountains and travels upward, as we talked about before when we talked about ancient Egypt, the Nile River, and there's lots of mountains in this area as well. The tallest mountain in Africa is Mount Kilimanjaro. In South and Southern Africa, you have a lot of rainforest in this area mainly, and grasslands toward the south, where you'll see lots of those wildlife preserves, where the wild animals kind of roam. Bantu-speaking peoples were many groups who had similar cultures in West Africa. So the Bantu mainly started right here where you see the red blob right there. But eventually, for some reason, the Bantu people decided to start to migrate in other areas. This happened around 1000 BC. Some Bantu groups started to move out and migrate south and east, looking for new lands to farm and herd. So as you follow the arrows, you can see kind of the path that a lot of these Bantu-speaking peoples followed on their migration. This is known as the Bantu migrations. We're now going to start talking about three trading kingdoms that developed in West Africa. The first one is called Ghana, and the title of this slide is called The Growth of Ghana's Empire. Ghana was a farming region that also played a role in the gold for salt trade. As you look on the map here, Ghana is in this yellow area. Ghana had a lot of gold, but the one thing they didn't have was salt. Salt came from the northern areas up here in the Sahara near the Mediterranean Sea. But they needed salt. They needed salt to preserve their food. North Africa had the salt, and they wanted gold. So this new trade happened between North Africa and Ghana. It became known as the Trans-Saharan trade. Trans meaning across. So the Ghanans traded across the desert to get that salt. Now, by doing this trade, the religion of Islam was introduced to Ghana by a group of people from North Africa called the Berbers. Mali builds on Ghana's foundation. Mali is the next empire that will form. Now, a group had conquered Ghana. It was called the Almoravids. They will conquer Ghana. Mali is going to develop their empire kind of where Ghana was at previously. It was founded by a group of people called the Malinke people, and they had a chief known as Sundiata. So he is going to form the Mali Empire by conquering the capital of Ghana. And a new town will be created in Mali called Timbuktu. It becomes a center of trade and culture. I always find it funny because when I was a kid growing up, your parents always said, "I want to send you to Timbuktu." Timbuktu always meant that was kind of the middle of nowhere. And if you look at a map of West Africa, you'll see Timbuktu is on a river, but you don't see much around it. Mali's most famous king was Mansa Musa, who made a pilgrimage to Mecca with an impressive caravan of wealth. This guy was rich. And as he traveled across the desert to get to Mecca for his pilgrimage, people heard he was coming, would line the streets, and he would throw gold out to everyone, and people just loved Mansa Musa. Very wealthy. The third kingdom we'll talk about is Songhai. So the empire of Songhai develops. They had tried for a long time to develop an empire. It just didn't happen very quickly. Eventually, a guy named Sunni Ali is going to overthrow the Berbers who had taken over Timbuktu from Mali. And by doing such, he formed the Songhai Empire. One of their most famous kings was a guy named Askia Muhammad. He became king in 1493, and he expanded the empire Songhai and made it a well-running machine, if you will, by appointing governors for each of the provinces. So he divided Songhai into provinces and appointed a governor. You can see on the map here is Songhai. Eventually, Songhai will be conquered by a group of people from North Africa called the Moroccans, as you can see right up here. And the Moroccans used a new weapon that the people of Songhai had never seen before, a cannon. That's how they were able to defeat Songhai. We are now going to move to the east in Africa and talk about some trading civilizations over in the east. And the first one we'll talk about is Aksum, so the rise of Aksum. Aksum was located in what we call the Horn of Africa. As you look at this map of Eastern Africa, this part right here is known as the Horn of Africa. It's right by Saudi Arabia. This became known as Aksum. It's kind of near where, when we talked about Nubia, that's that area right there. Aksum became a trading hub in the east. A hub just means it's kind of the center of trade. And a king there, known as King Ezana, created a powerful nation that controlled trade and known for large stone pillars that celebrated great victories. So in this picture you see this large stone pillars, and they would be inscribed of the victories that they had. Trading towns also developed along the east coast of Africa. One of the more famous ones and bigger ones was a city called Kilwa. It was formed by Arabs and Persians, merchants from those two places, who came to Africa through Kilwa. And you can see on the map here where I made a blue dot here. That's where the trading city of Kilwa was, in what we would call Tanzania today. When these merchants came to Kilwa, not only are they trading their goods, but they're also introducing Islam to the people in Kilwa. So when the Africans and these Arab merchants were trading with each other, it started a blended culture. This blended culture will eventually create a language that is now spoken often in East Africa called Swahili. The next kingdom we'll talk about is the Shona, and they are also known as Great Zimbabwe. The Shona formed in the grasslands of southern Africa and consisted of settlements encircled by large stone walls. These large stone wall settlements were called Zimbabwes. The largest Shona civilization became known as Great Zimbabwe, and it became very wealthy by taxing traders. Now these traders, Zimbabwe didn't have the gold that a lot of traders wanted, nor did they have the salt that other people wanted or other goods. They were kind of in the middle of the trade route. So as these Arab settlers were coming into Africa and they were heading kind of northwestern part of Africa, they would hit Great Zimbabwe first. And how Shona became really rich was by taxing those traders who wandered through Great Zimbabwe. As you can see in the pictures, here's an example of some remains of Great Zimbabwe, where you have the wall around that little settlement there. That was the largest. And here's an aerial view of that, where you can see the walled settlement there. That is Great Zimbabwe. Congo is the last settlement we're going to talk about. Congo was a kingdom along the Congo River and was very profitable. Congo is kind of in central Africa. In the 1480s, Portugal, which had just started developing this new exploration and trade system, had come to Africa and started trading with Congo. Portugal is a country that's right next to Spain in Europe. The king of Portugal was a king named King Nzinga Mamemba, and because he liked the Portuguese culture so much, he actually changed his name to a Portuguese name, Afonso I, and he copied many of the Portuguese ways. Unfortunately, slave trade started to develop. When the Portuguese had arrived, not only did they want to trade goods to Africa, but they also wanted slave labor for some of their colonies that they had just started gathering. And so a slave trade begins during this time, and King Alfonso actually did not like that. he wanted to stop the slave trade, and he begged the King of Portugal to stop it, but the King of Portugal basically ignored King Alfonso, and the slave trade will grow and grow until it pretty much drained the West African population. West Africa was devastated due to the slave trade, and it began in the 1480s when Portugal came to Africa. That's the end of our notes. Thanks.